Hi everyone. I suppose first of all I just want to say it's an absolute honour to be here today, and it's great to be on a panel with such eloquent speakers as well. I'm very impressed by the level of I suppose stories and different ideas that I've heard so far this morning. Just to give you a bit of background to myself, so I'm the president of the Union of Students in Ireland. My name is Laura. I'm from County Cork myself. Balavorney, a small village just inside the Cork border from Kerry, eldest of 5 girls. Haven't done much travelling at all myself, actually, never been outside of Europe, but a lot of my friends would have moved abroad to Australia and New Zealand, lost them in New York now, lost them over in London as well. So even the village that I'd be from down home, there's a very big, I suppose, depletion of young people in that village. Many of them just have gone. They've gone away to college in different areas. So I've seen that over the years, that the demographic, I suppose, is a lot older than it would have been when I was growing up there originally. But my own experience of emigration, I suppose, is, I always remember when I was younger hearing the stories. My aunts and uncles in the 80s would have moved abroad to London and New York. My aunt and uncle lived in New York for nearly 20 years. They actually moved back during the boom times. I don't know if that was a good decision or not, but they came back anyway. And my grandparents as well would have moved to Middlesbrough in the UK in the 1950s, would have worked there for a number of years, came back with all their kids in the late 60s. So I was very accustomed to hearing the stories of emigration, and now very much seeing it on a first-person perspective with my friends who have moved abroad, but I myself have never been away yet. So I want to kind of pose a question, I suppose, at the start, and we talk about the costs and the benefits of emigration to Ireland and to other countries. And I mean, people emigrate for various reasons, and I think no matter what the economic climate is, there'll always be adventurers there who will want to emigrate anyway. They'll want to see the world, so that there'll always be some level of emigration regardless of what the economic situation is in the country. And I suppose, why do people emigrate? And I think one of the central things and why a lot of people are emigrating at the moment is because they believe that they're intrinsically valuable as a person, and they want to realise their full potential. And unfortunately, it's not viable in a lot of circumstances now to realise your full potential in Ireland as a young person. So you have to go abroad in order to do that. So a lot of it is about self-belief. It's about believing that you're better than the situation that you're in at the moment, and you want to go abroad to try and change that. And we talk about the loss of emigration, and the mourning and people leaving the country. But at the same time, I think we have to ask ourselves, is it almost just as much of a loss if people stay in Ireland, to almost waste away with no opportunity? Is that more of a loss to the country? Is it actually better if they do move away? And I know since the economic crisis began in 2008, we've seen something like 170,000 young people have left the country, which is an enormous number when you look at it like that. And I think it's also maybe worth mentioning that not everybody can emigrate. It's not a decision that everyone has the privilege to make, because it's very expensive, to be able to come up with the costs to actually pay for a flight, set yourself up in another country with accommodation, find a job. Some countries, Australia, for example, you have to have a certain amount of money in your bank account before you can even leave the country. So, it's a privilege to even be able to make that decision in some instances. But I suppose from a young person's perspective, and I work with the Union of Students in Ireland, and we would obviously be commenting on a range of different issues. So I wanted to kind of maybe outline some of the perspectives and how young people are being affected in the country as it stands at the moment, and why it's maybe not a great place to be if you are a young person. So we would have seen the social welfare cuts in the last budget. So they were essentially halved. So young people who aren't in education, who are unemployed, are expected to live on €100 per week if you're under the age of 26. It's very difficult to live on that, and especially if you're maybe you're living in a rural area. We've a 40% risk of social exclusion for young people in Ireland. If you're living in a rural area, you want to apply for a job, you have to move to Dublin. You're expected to live on €100 per week. The price of a train ticket alone could be almost, a third of your welfare payment. That's to go for your job interview. It's expensive to even look for work. So it's not very, I suppose, encouraging in that regard. So we have a 26% youth unemployment rate. We also have very little investment in youth services. We would have seen many cuts over the last number of years. The youth guarantee, which is a guarantee where young people will be either able to apply for an education course or some sort of a job or study. There was 14 million invested in that in the budget last year, but the cost to run the programme overall is 173 million, so it's very much underfunded. We've got the fourth highest youth suicide rate in Europe, a lot of mental health issues in Ireland, and we've got the second highest tuition fees for education in the EU area as well, just after the UK. So the maximum fees in the UK are £9,000 sterling. Here, with the last budget there, they've risen now to €3,000 per annum. So very, very expensive to actually go to college here. And if you compare it to the Nordic countries, they will actually pay you to go to college. They have very high financial aid as well for people in education. Whereas we have quite low levels. I would have seen Germany as well, I think it was about 2 weeks ago. The last state in Germany, they actually abolished their tuition fees completely in Germany as well. So I think we need to be very much thinking about education and how we can get more people into education. I think even in the boom times as well, not much was done to get more working class people into the education system. So even when there was a lot more money going around and the fees were lower, there weren't enough programs there. There weren't enough programs to encourage, adult literacy, and for parents to, I suppose, value it and pass on that value of education to their offspring. So there's a lot of work to be done in that area as well. And I think we have to, we've talked about teachers as well today, and I think we need to look at teachers and teacher education and what they mean and where the value is placed on teachers now, I suppose, compared to the past. I think in the past, teachers were very much a central role to the community, very well respected in the community, whereas now I'm not sure if the teaching profession overall is reflective of society as a whole. I mean, a lot of teachers, and again, vast generalisation, but would be, white, middle class. You wouldn't get a large, I suppose, spectrum in the area, and I think that's something that needs to be looked at, because I mean these are the people that are, I suppose, implanting and passing on knowledge to younger generations, and if the students don't see themselves reflected overall in their teachers, then it could be quite discouraging. So I think that's something that needs to be looked at, and what subjects are taught in school as well. Philosophy, for example, a lot of European countries would teach philosophy, whereas we don't have a big emphasis on that, or in civics, and wider, I suppose, critical analysis. And then workers' rights as well as another big issue, and I think we've seen a large erosion of the rights of workers in this country over the last number of years. I know the Employment Rights Agency did a study in 2012 of I think over 1,000 different companies across the island, and it found that over 50% of them were in breach of the minimum wage, so they weren't paying the minimum wage. And as well, there's an expectation now almost that, if you're going through education, you do your degree and you almost have to graduate into the workforce then after that as well. So the job bridge scheme, there's an expectation there. You may have to work for 6 months, 9 months, a year on no money for no pay before you'll actually be entitled to earn your place in society and get valued, I suppose, at the same level as everybody else. So that doesn't just affect young people, of course. It's not all about young people, but it certainly does affect them, I think, maybe disproportionately at the moment. The job bridge scheme, for example. And then another issue as well is, I think, bringing it back to the education, and I know we've talked about arts a lot. I think there's a huge threat to arts in Ireland as a whole, and a huge devaluing of, I suppose, creativity. And a lot of third level education in particular now has been driven by privatisation, corporations, businesses, and people are encouraged to study purely to get a job, which obviously, you need to be able to get employment after your study. But at the same time, people need to be encouraged to study what they care about most and what they love. And unfortunately, I don't think a lot of young people these days are being encouraged to study, literature or poetry or drama or the arts. And I think that we're going to see a huge loss from that over the course of the coming years if we continue going down with the privatisation model that we seem to be following at the moment. And then voter registration and political awareness. I mean, 1 in 3 young people, I think, aren't registered to vote, which is quite a high number, 1 in 3. So I don't know how we can expect to affect political change if we don't change that. And there's huge disparity in the system as well. In a lot of other countries, it's very, you're automatically registered to vote at a certain age, or it's a very simple process. You go online and register. But in Ireland, it seems every city and county council seem to have different perspectives as to how you register, what details you need to fill in. So it's not exactly an easy process. And of course, you need a Garda as well to stamp it. So I don't necessarily know if the political classes are as encouraging as they should be for people to actually get active in the system and have their voices heard. But just kind of, I suppose, I'm going to make a few more points. We talked about James Fintan Lalor as being a visionary, and I think we need to have more visionaries in this country, and we need to encourage them as a whole. And I know Robert Frost was quoted as well, as Michael Noonan would have quoted Robert Frost on the day of the budget last week. So two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and I took the road less travelled by. And I don't think that Ireland is taking the road less travelled by. I think that we need to be a little bit more creative and think outside the box. I think we need to have conversations about what public goods are. So what are the things in society that we really value and that we really want to invest in? I would think that education, health and our welfare system are 3 things that are public goods. If you invest in them, they don't just benefit individuals, they benefit society as a whole. And I think there's a big discussion to be had around taxes as well. And how much tax we pay, how much tax we're willing to pay to invest in these services. Quite worrying to see that the government are looking at cutting taxes at the moment, because I don't think it reflects long-term thinking. And I think if we look back on our ancestors, so that would have built, with say, Newgrange, for example, which has lasted thousands and thousands of years, I think we need to maybe ask ourselves, what is our legacy going to be if our society collapsed right now? What would actually remain? Would anything remain? Is there anything constant in it? Would it be literature? The online world isn't exactly constant. If that collapsed, and the whole lot of it is gone. So we need to see what's going to be our legacy. And I think with politics, you've got your 5-year term or whatever it is, and you're constantly looking to get the votes for the next election. And I think there's a huge loss of long-term strategies that regardless of what political party is in power, that you should be following the same strategy. So we need more of a long-term vision. And I think there's a huge risk that we'll just slip back to the same mistakes again. So I don't know how much we've learned from the economic crisis that we've just been through. And I think as well, I'm just going to finish up now, but there was a lot of a focus on materialism over the last number of years. And I think it's probably a global thing. It's not just like Ireland, focusing on material goods and material wealth. And I don't know how much of our sense of community that we're retaining, what community means to us at the moment. And I think that's something that maybe the economic crisis actually helped us to maybe bring a little bit back. I think it's maybe brought us back down to ground again, and a lot of our wealth and materialism has been stripped away to an extent. And I think that was a really positive thing, that we've actually had to maybe invest a little bit more in relationships. People are going through crises around us because of economic circumstances, and we've had to actually realise, okay, there's a lot more than just buying houses and cars and attaining wealth. But I suppose I just want to leave you with a couple of questions, really, before I finish up. Is how can we, we're Irish, but how can we be more global citizens, citizens of the world, Another question would be, how autonomous do we really think we are as individuals? Like, how much control do we actually have in society? How much of it is, pre-decided for us by governmental decisions and economic circumstance? And how can we be more supportive of critical thinking and young people? And the last thing, I think, is how can we support the arts as a whole in our society, and ensure that the great culture and history that we have in terms of the arts, and I know loads of famous writers and poets were quoted here, how can we ensure that that tradition continues into the future?